Corridor charrette meeting. My name is Jesslyn from Miami-Dade County, Regulatory and Economic Resources. We really appreciate you coming and attending and taking a bit of your time to participate. These planning processes depend on your participation because we do need your input to come up with a project and recommendations and results that reflect the community. So thanks again for coming. I guess it's about 7:15, so let's get started. I don't want to hang out here too long. Just to go over the agenda, introductions. Let's see. You know who I am. We have Gilbert Blanco from my department, and Josh Rack, and Maria Elena Cedeno from RER. Phil Steinmiller from FDOT is going to talk about the Krome Avenue project, and Myra Diaz is somewhere here from MDX. She was here before. She'll be back. Somebody was coming with her, and I think she's running a little late, but Myra is here. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do as far as review the transportation improvements that are going to go on in the area. Krome Avenue, and then the potential 836 extension of the Dolphin Expressway into the West Kendall area. I think if you were at one of the earlier meetings, Commissioner Zapata had mentioned that project, and I think there were some questions that were asked about that, and so we wanted to get some additional information to share with everybody directly from the source. So that's why we've asked staff from MDX to attend. And then talking about transportation. Along with transportation, you can't really talk about transportation without talking about land use because they go hand in hand, and so we'll have a brief discussion about the relation between the two, following the two staff presentations. So any questions before we get started? Yes, sir.
You had also committed to talking about the 874 extension over the Turnpike. That was part of what was going to be on the agenda tonight from MDX.
Well, we'll ask Myra about that. Okay. I'm not as familiar with that one, but please bring it up. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a date yet for the January Saturday meeting?
We don't. We have to find a location, and as soon as we can get something available, we'll let you know. So, but that will be, you'll have plenty of advance notice for that. Bill, would you like to begin? Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
It wouldn't be this location since the meetings have been here?
It's a possibility. If we could get something larger, we may need something larger. It just depends. But we'll let you know. Don't worry. We don't want to confuse anybody. So you'll have plenty of advance notice. All right, thank you.
Okay, so
It's this one to go forward, and then there's a later point.
all right, good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Steinmiller. I'm the planning manager at DOT. I work in the Intermodal Systems Development Office of District 6, and we're based right off of where the Turnpike and 836 meet. So Jess asked me to come and give a little bit of an overview of a couple of projects we have that are in the area, basically the very western end of your corridor. We have two projects on Krome Avenue. The first project I'll go over is starting at the south, beginning at Southwest 136th Street up to Kendall, and includes the intersection. That is a project where we're going to be widening and reconstructing the roadway. They'll have 4 lanes, 2 lanes each direction with a median. That particular project has been chosen to be a concrete project. We have kind of some new initiatives with concrete from the department, and there's a high truck percentage in that corridor, so that was one of the reasons for choosing that one. The construction will start in approximately 2.5 years, June of 16, and it'll be about a 2-year long construction duration. And right now our cost estimate, I gave you just a general cost, but it's about $37 million for construction. The other project which we have, which will actually be the first project to go to construction, is our project from Kendall on the south end up to Southwest A Street. That's a much longer project. Again, that will be a 4-lane cross-section with a wide median. And that one will be our typical, what we call flexible pavement, but asphalt. And that will be starting June of 2015. So really, that's very close. Because of the longer length, that'll be about a 3-year duration of construction, and that's approximately a $47 million project. If you have any other detailed questions, I have some typical sections just to kind of show you the layout of the lanes and the median and things like that. One thing I will point out on both of these projects, it's going to have a shoulder that would be available for bicycling. Okay, so it's going to have the shoulder and it will be marked for bicycles. There's just one other thing I want to let you know. During construction, we'll maintain lanes open. So certainly during rush hour, you'll have one lane each direction open. They may be closed during off-peak hours. And we're putting in a new signal at Southwest 136th Street. Question?
I see Mr. Arizari's here tonight. He and I, looking around the room, I don't see anybody else who were members of the Citizens Advisory Committee that helped to formulate the design, getting input from the public. And I think if I remember correctly, that was back in 2002, wasn't it, Frank?
It was.
So here we are 11 years later, and we're just beginning to talk about 2 more years from now, we're going to start construction on something that we worked on back in 2002. Progress moves along very slowly.
Well, you know, I'm in long-range planning, and you know, we're always maintaining the long-range plan. And you know, yeah, unfortunately, you know, there's a lot of effort that goes
My
into
question,
getting
though,
projects.
is based on the cross sections that you have here, have they changed since the final design was presented to that committee? Because
I
there was
don't know
supposed
the
to be
answer
a
to that
continuous
question.
bicycle path on the shoulder that I believe was going to be on the west side, the Everglades side, so that you would have a complete bike trail all the way up the corridor that would be separated from the traffic. Is that still the idea?
What I can tell you is that in the southern project,
Yeah, that's the part I'm talking
there
about.
is a bike path on the east side, I believe, running up to the canal. And it's tying into a Miami-Dade proposed bike facility along the canal. That will be separate from the actual roadway.
And then it just ends.
It ends at the canal, but it's to tie into a future Miami-Dade facility along the canal. Good question.
Are there any plans to wind it from the trail up to 27?
Yes. Yes.
How far into the future?
We have actually been able to advance 3 segments into our 5-year work program recently. So we will be able to, yeah, we're going to keep constructing it all the way to Okeechobee as the funding becomes available.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm more scared of that piece of it.
Yeah, sure.
The bike trail, are you saying that it starts at 136 and just ends shortly, what, half a mile down the road? How long is actually the bike trail?
It ends at the canal on the northern limit, and I don't know if the design PM is here. Have anything to add?
It's up to the canal. I'm not sure how long it is in terms of miles right now.
But basically, it will run, my understanding is it runs from the southern limit up to the canal, and that it would then, Miami-Dade at some point would be taking the pathway, then extending it to the east along the canal. I don't know, maybe we can get some more information.
And the decision not to continue it north, I mean, I don't see a logical ending point there. I mean, what do people north of that canal do?
Well, there are the on-road bike facilities, okay, so there's the shoulder, which is the entire length. So, I mean, the bike facilities are there, but the separate path is not north of the canal.
How wide is the bike path?
The separated path, or the shoulder.
Yeah.
The separated path is a 12-foot cross-section, and the shoulders are 5 feet.
Referring to a paved, since the road is concrete, what's the bike path going to be?
It'll be the same.
Concrete?
Yeah.
How wide is the bike? How wide did you say?
The shoulders?
Yes.
5 feet.
5 feet on your side?
Yes.
Could you maybe explain the section for the audience, starting from shoulder to shoulder, each width, and whether it's a travel lane, a bike path? Do they have sidewalks?
I wish I had a PowerPoint slide of this, but I don't. But basically, you've got about 24 feet for travel lanes in each direction, 12-foot lanes. You've got inside and outside shoulders. You've got drainage swales. I have these. I mean, we can pass these around. I can put them in the back if everybody wants to see
And a
them.
divided median.
Divided median. Yes.
That would be part of them talking about.
Is there going to be any landscaping in the meeting?
No landscape.
It's all concrete to protect cars from running into each other.
That'd be like concrete
Question.
wall?
How many miles is it in totality, the two projects?
Just head on.
Ooh, good question. I'd have to calculate it from 136 up to 8th Street. I'd have to do the math. It's basically
8 miles.
13 miles.
From 136 to
as many section lines as there are. That would be the number of miles. So
16 blocks is a mile.
right.
So it's 8 miles from 136 to 8, another 8 miles from 8 to, I'm sorry, 136 to Kendall, and from Kendall to,
I think it's maybe only 3 or 4 miles up to Kendall from Southwest 136, and it's probably about 8 miles up Kendall. It's probably about 12 miles total length. I can double check that for you.
Phil, I don't know if you spoke about this, but could you explain to the audience the reasons for the 4 lanes with median? And could you give us a little bit of the history of as to the current condition and as to why we're doing this, so they know the reasons for going to this expense and this expansion?
Safety and just congestion to meet the needs of the future travel.
My understanding is there's been a lot of accidents on that road for many years due to the congestion with trucks and.
If you recall, back around 2000, 99, 2000, we had a series of fatal accidents in the corridor, which kind of brought it back. I mean, Krome was in the plan as a 2-lane roadway only, and then it was brought back as a 4-lane roadway. So that kind of revived the project. And heavy truck percentage, a lot of agricultural traffic. It is on the strategic intermodal system of the department. It does provide alternatives to the turnpike. It provides for long trip lengths. You can take it from basically the southern part of the county all the way up to almost to the Broward County line. So, it is a significant corridor. And, I think, this is going to come up later in your agenda, but, widening the roadway does not have to lead to additional development along the corridor. If you can control the land use, if you can control the access, these things that the county has control over, it doesn't have to become a highly developed corridor.
And that was always an argument for people not wanting Krome Avenue to be widened, because if you build it, they will come, was always the mantra of people down in the Redland.
There's
installed this for a long time. They challenged it and had lawsuits.
There's many examples of roadways around the country that can be cited where a roadway could be developed where it doesn't have to lead to development.
But exactly which developer is planning which development along Krome Avenue? to really have triggered this?
I don't, I
Several
have no
years
idea.
ago, when they tried using the CSX to go to the zoo, we found that Lennar was planning a 10,000 person development abutting Krome Avenue. Now, has that all come to fruition, facing,
You'd have to ask the county about this.
you have
issue.
no
Yeah.
idea?
I'm not dealing with, at this point in time, I have nothing.
Long-term planner, you told us you have to know which developments are being planned.
Right now, I mean, I'm not reviewing any developments along Krome Avenue, and I don't know if the county has anything, but I don't have any information.
So you figure this is just going to be a pristine thing, nobody's going to go near it with development that's been feared for years?
I think that's the later agenda item.
Also, it came in late, you have not addressed Kendall Drive yet at all? I mean, bike paths are important, but Kendall Drive is a parking lot. It's been a parking lot for 40 years. Any plans on that tonight?
Kendall, my understanding, based on the long-range transportation plan, the county CDMP has already widened to the extent it's shown in the long-range plan.
Okay, part of Palmetto Expressway, where it butts into the Turnpike extension, is 11 lanes in the north direction. 11 lanes. So my question is, when we finish paving all of Dade County, then what are you going to do? Cars and roads are not the answer. We've been fighting and screaming. I gave up 5 years ago, but I'm back again for Metro Rail. How many billions has the county spent on roads? Do you have any idea? I-95, the Turnpike, Palmetto, 836. How many billions? Billions with a B. Any idea?
Sir, the information is available online. The MPO website has the entire transportation improvement program, the 5-year program of improvements, and all that information is there.
Because 5 years ago, when we had the East Kendall charrette, or whatever it was, we were told, oh no, you can't have Metro Rail on Kendall because it costs $100 million a mile. At that time, they were widening 826, 2 miles, from Bird to Sunset. The cost was $220 million. Now with the spaghetti that's all over the place, I'm wondering how many billions. And all we're talking about are bike paths? Dear God, did people take a bike to get here tonight? Or were they stuck on Kendall Drive?
I don't think you're really looking for an answer. but-
Government's obviously not the answer. We've got to build our own Metro Rail, I guess.
So we can move forward?
Yeah, why don't you go to the next agenda item? I mean, unless there's any other questions.
Just stepped out, he's coming back.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much. We have Commissioner Zapata here in the room, so let's welcome him to the meeting. And we do have Myra Diaz from MDX. She's in the lobby. She'll be with us in a second. Is there anything else you'd like me to entertain you before we move on to MDX? Not. Yes.
Now, do you want to just address that we have discussed Kendall Drive the first 2 meetings?
Yes, yes.
And we have talked about the different modes of transportation and
Yes.
buses, and this is just, we're talking from today.
Yes, exactly. And MDX. This is Myra Diaz and Terry Garcia. Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming, both of you. It's you guys are up, so let's whatever you'd like to share with us regarding the 836 study, the potential
this report.
And 874.
Oh, yes, please, let them
We
know.
can talk a little bit about that.
Thank you.
Apologize for the delay, and thank you for DOT for going ahead of us. Just to tell you a little bit about some of our projects in the area. Thank you. Right now, we are about to start a what is called an environmental impact study. This is the highest degree of environmental study that any transportation project can perform. Basically, what we identified several years ago, using the input from the MPO, it's the needs for some type of infrastructure that would service not only the future, but in fact, the existing growth that has occurred over the years in West Kendall. If you take a look at my map, is the turnpike, in fact, is all the way over here, out of here. And that is the only expressway really that services all this development that has occurred over time. Of course, everyone has to fight with, going to the east-west corridors to reach your destination, from home to work. What we did is we have our 836, and we identified a study area. And basically, the study area is looking at some type of connection from 836 to the West Kendall area. The study area for these types of planning studies. Oh, okay. The study area for these types of studies, usually encompasses a lot more. So we really are looking. What is the right one? Right here. Currently, 836 ends at approximately 12th Street, 8th Street. You exit at 137th Avenue, and that was, of course, a new 3-mile extension that we opened in 2007. The idea is, in some fashion, extend that, this is 137th Avenue, extend somehow to, we know that most of the traffic really occurs north of Kendall. But because this type of study has to look at the study area goes from 12th Street to 136th Street, from Krome to east of 157th Avenue. The idea is to create a transportation corridor that, as I said, can service this entire area that has no infrastructure today. I know that, a lot of the things that the planning department and have been looking at, and I know some of the projects that have occurred to the west, like the West Kendall Hospital, is always looking at that counterflow traffic. How do you go west instead of going east? Regardless, this type of facility would be servicing that. What you see here is anytime MDX identifies a project, sometimes we do a preliminary planning study that is quicker, is faster, and it gives us a really good handle of the needs of the area, of the issues, of the challenges. Obviously, there's a lot of environmental, this is a heavy environmental issue, and also it gives us a grasp of what is the pulse of the public. So back in 2008-9, we did what is called a concept report, and at that time, I don't know if many of you, but we met with a lot of the homeowners associations in this area, which really understood what something like this may mean. And at that time, we identified very preliminarily 3 very general corridors. One of the corridors is obviously on 157th Avenue, which would be the most disruptive to already existing urbanized area. And then we also,
Terry,
looked.
do you mean 137 or do you mean
No,
157?
157, right here. This is 157. 137 Lawrence is all the way here. I mean, this is how, look at this. Look at I don't know if you can take a look at the aerial.
Well, on your map up there, 137th is way too, that's
here.
137th there,
Here's
right?
137.
Here's
Coming down
137,
there.
right, here's 137 Lawrence, right there.
Okay.
So anyway, another one that we took a look at is the westernmost, close to Krome, hugging Krome. And then we took a look at another one which kind of hugs the urban boundary line, because the intent of this is really to provide infrastructure of a limited access facility, which is usually an expressway as opposed to an arterial or another type of roadway that has limited access, looking at only at major intersections, interchanges, Kendall, Bird, not one at every stop. And the idea was to see how we could service, in fact, that with the purpose of not really promoting or initiating or any other type of westward expansion, continued westward expansion, but in fact to service the backlog that exists there. MDX for any new corridor, this is really would be a new corridor, would be looking at multimodal facilities. That means from now to the point where something like this would be first we have to check that it's feasible, that is feasible, that we can mitigate all impacts, that we could get environmental clearances, that it has public support, and that we can mitigate or eliminate any negative impacts. That's really the first check. The second check also is a financial look at this. How can we finance this? Because you can't probably finance all with tolls, because this is what we call a mega project. I mean, this is a very large project. Although we may also look, if all the check marks are there, is how can we build something like this in phases? You don't have to do the entire thing at once. And also, can it be a multimodal corridor? Spaces for, whether for some type of transit, whether it's express transit, buses, bikeways, etc. And that's what we call a multimodal corridor, which would be, a new corridor for MDX. So our study, finally, we have a consultant in place. They have just received the NTP. This is very timely for us, because we will advertise. I would love to have whoever has been invited to this meeting, because you are the public. We want you to attend our meetings. There'll probably be a kickoff meeting sometime in early next year, and then we'll take it from there. The study will probably is estimated to take about 5 years, but MDX is certainly looking at how to compress that time. Obviously, not jumping through any necessary evaluations, but we know that this is something that, when we did the preliminary visits to a lot of the homeowners associations, there was a lot of support. There's some also some concerns from environmental groups, which sees, the possibility of this, promoting growth, and we want to make sure that even though MDX does not really has jurisdiction over land use, but how can we work together with the county to in fact safeguard those kind of things. With me today for the hard questions is the planning manager for Miami-Dade Expressway Authority, Myra Diaz. So I told her, I talk and you answer the hard questions. So that would be it, Jess. We look forward to really seeing how you can follow us. We have, if we will, it'll be a real challenge to how many people do we notify, but we want to make it very, very expansive. And all our meetings are always on our website.
That's what I was going to say. On your website, can you expand on this area? Can you make sure that you always post?
Absolutely.
The time?
All our meetings, and more when something like this, when a big meeting is coming up, if you go to our website, it's usually on the front page, and it'll take you a link to the fact sheet,
What I'm saying is you
etc.
can have a dedicated tab for
You,
the same 36.
it already has. In fact, I brought not too many, but I bought some project fact sheets that you can download from there too. I think I'm going to take the young man in the back and then the young man in the middle. No, the young man in the middle. You're the young man in the middle. Yes, sir.
We just heard MDOT about expanding and widening what's likely the route that this road would take. Would you then tear up that roadway?
No. By the way, I forgot to say something. These three areas, potential corridors that I mentioned, were corridors that were preliminarily identified on the concept report. When the PD&E of the environmental impact statement starts, it's a blank slate. They can, take a look at these three, or they can take a look at others. To assume that the one more to the west would be a selected alternative, or the more possible, it doesn't work that way. But obviously, and we work very closely with our sister agency, there is capacity for both. I mean, DOT has been looking at Krome for how many years now? 20? I was a little girl. And there's a lot of safety issues. There's a lot of finally that all has been able to clear. But all that will be taken into consideration. We don't come back and tear anything. The first thing that you have to do is you have to confirm and prove that there's a purpose and that there's a need. Those are the two.
I've done a PD&E study.
There you go.
Yeah. I've thought Alton Road. But so you're saying that you would put a limited access highway next to a widened Krome Avenue?
What I'm saying is that I can't tell you that it would be that corridor. We'll take a look at the corridor to the west. We'll take a look at the corridor that hugs the urban boundary line. We'll take a look at other corridors. I mean, sometimes it's, in these PD&Es, and more when you go into something like this, sometimes you start maybe with 15, 20 alternatives. They start to come down to something. But any type of coordination, whether it's needed, whether there's the need for both facilities, for a local facility such as Krome and an expressway, a limited access facility, all those things have to be looked at in the traffic studies and evaluation.
Terry, thank you for adding years to my life. The government sees me as a senior citizen, and you just made me a young man again. Thank you.
We can.
Since the commissioner of the district is here, this idea was floated by someone in this room. So if it ever gets built, it needs to be called the Martha Backer Extension. She's the one who originally floated this whole idea. So Commissioner, please make a note to give her credit when the time is due after her due demise.
Oh, thank you.
And I apologize, Commissioner. I did not see you. I did not see you sitting there in the back. My respects.
And added to that commentary, to the gentleman in the back, when Krome Avenue was made into a wider corridor, that's not considered an expressway. What you're proposing is an expressway. That's like we have I-95 running along Biscayne Boulevard as an example. So this is an expressway that you're planning, and that's why you could potentially have both of them running along each other.
There's different facilities with different purposes as long as there is demand. And so if there is demand for both facilities, yes.
Martha Backer extension.
I am not, I am Martha Backer, and I sat in this room and I proposed this idea because in most major cities, we have a 195 or a 395 that takes you around, and so that everybody is funneled into town. So at that point, I thought Krome or 157 would be fine to piggyback possibly, and you could have, even Krome could have like a, exits and stuff. I like the idea. I don't usually like MDX because I'm being charged up the wazoo with the things. And you'll see my name a lot of times on my rollback to tolls and the planning of such things. When I get off by the school, by Miami-Dade, I have trouble. It bothers me. It's still not finished as far as I'm concerned, and we're still being told for two years now. So I just want to say that I do like the idea of having something that starts down in Homestead, and it was an evacuation plan idea. It was safety to life that
She's
my
referring to
concern
Krome now.
was.
She's referring to Krome.
Not Krome. It was, no. I'm talking about if there's a hurricane, people evacuated, getting out of Miami, and
the original idea, and that's why the study areas like this, because as you know, one of our other projects that one is already funded and starting construction, very soon, is the 874 ramp extension to 128th Street. What that means is that now, for the people, I don't think it's in here. Well, the airport is here, yes. Right now, if you take 874, it dead ends at the turnpike. So you either have to exit at 120th or 152nd. What is going to happen is there's going to be a ramp that will come out of 874 and land on 128th Street. So that will give those individuals living in that area a third alternative to leave the area. And the idea, Martha, was to, in fact, loop.
Right.
Well, I did try 874.
That 137th Avenue to Kendall. I mean, I tried that, but it's just slow. When you get off from the airport, and I took it west, and I came, and it needs to be sped up, and it needs to extend out to wherever without charging us too much.
And I have to tell you, and I know that for whatever the whole tolling message is a real tough one.
Yeah.
Because I don't like to pay more taxes. I don't like to pay more tolls. But what happens is, if you take a look at how transportation projects are funded these days, based on a formula of a gas tax that is from what year? The 60s, which and has been looked at, because what happens is there is not enough funding throughout the nation, not only forget about new projects, to in fact do the maintenance of your major infrastructures. Look at what has been happening nationwide with some bridges. Why? Because there's not enough funding. So in that type of scenario, what is not only Miami-Dade County, but throughout the nation and even international, the only other finance mechanism is a user fee, which is tolling. So, it's tough, but I think, our hardest job is to communicate what is it that we do. And obviously, everything that we collect, 100%, remains in Miami-Dade County. Everything, MDX does not receive any state funds. They don't receive any federal funds. We don't receive any sales tax from transit. It's exclusively tolls. And before MDX existed, obviously these were under jurisdiction of DOT, which collected and then came back. But now this is an agency of the state, a local agency of the state that collects these funds and remain locally and get 100% invested locally. It's tough, but that's the story.
You also get funds from the PTV?
No.
Do not?
No.
And federal government, you need one. to get the money, and we need to stop it eventually. But
Listen.
we do need that road.
If we can find the money somewhere else, more power to us. Yes.
I have a question. The legend there shows the red, which is Krome. That would be the
No, that's, it says alternative.
like-
No, it says alternative.
oh,
Those
because
are,
it shows this is the alternate.
no.
to-
The yellow dotted line is the
Uh-huh.
study area,
Oh, okay.
okay? And then
What is
the
this?
green,
The white
this blue thing,
Okay.
and the red is, at the time of that preliminary planning report, those were 3 preliminary
Okay.
corridors that were identified.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
First of all, as a founding member of the board of MDX, I really need to congratulate you and Javier and everybody that works at MDX. I believe I'm on record to be the only person who voted against raising the tolls the first time that came around. But I understand now the need to do that. And you don't mind, as a taxpayer, to pay a little bit more when you look at where the money is spent and how it's spent. I think the problem with us is that we pay a lot of taxes and we don't feel that we get it back in service from the government. But as I look at MDX as an entity, and the many years that I've been going to MDX, I really feel proud to be a founding member of the MDX board. I feel proud to have friends like you that really cares about this community. So yes, I agree. You know, taxes are tough to pay, especially these tough times. One thing I heard the gentleman from DOT refer, and so everybody wants to kind of ditch it out on the side. Does this mean growth, more growth to this area? And it looks like every agency wants to be away from growth. You know, like growth was something bad. Like growth was something that we don't want. And I tell you, it's all about planning. Those that have been here a long time remember the Makalili line in Kendall. And the Makalili line was held by the school board, and I don't remember exactly what avenue it was held at. But it was held for years and years and years. Nobody wanted to move that line because it was sacred.
No, not 90.
It was sacred.
152nd.
Well, what happened was the school board never bought any land because it was not, according to their bylaws or whatever, beyond that Makalili line. Well, they wind up with development beyond the line, not planning for it, not having a school, and then paying 10 times the price for the land that they needed for schools. So it's not so much about growth. Growth, if you plan growth correctly, we don't have to be afraid of growth. Is the planning of what is it exactly that is going to go here? Is it going to alleviate traffic? Is it something that is commercial that I don't have to travel all the way to get, I can get it here? So people, you know, when you mention growth, it's like a bad word. You know? This is not going to be growth. Growth, if you get on a helicopter and you go to Broward and you see the growth in Broward, they have done a terrific job in Broward. You know, and it's way past what Miami-Dade is. But they have planned for that growth and they have done it correctly. So that's the only other thing that I wanted to mention, that growth is nothing to be scared of, but to make sure that we're involved in it and it's done correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado, for your work. I think there was a question.
When you talk about multimodal roads, I don't hear anything like a metro rail in your vocabulary. Have you completely given up on that?
No, when I'm talking multimodal, I'm including transit. I am not identifying what type of transit. I'm just talking about, you know,
But you did mention
transit.
You mentioned every conceivable way.
No, I
to go.
said transit.
Well-
Metro rail is transit, buses are transit. What I can just tell you off, you know, this is not because obviously, is that as of today, I mean, maybe in 50 years, but I can tell you that even for the projects that have been in line for funding, you know, the East-West corridor, the 27th Avenue corridor, they haven't been able to be funded, so Miami-Dade Transit is looking at alternatives. So when I say transit, depending, on the money, on the demand, I'm including everything.
Before you came in, I had asked the gentleman how much our roads have cost in Miami-Dade County. Do you have any idea, anything, multi-billion-dollar answer?
Oh, multi.
Yeah.
Multi.
Well, all that money, they used to talk about Metro Rail being $1 billion white elephant. I think it has more than proven its worth, particularly with the price of gas, the fact that we had gridlock downtown before it was built. Well, couldn't those billions have been used more instead of just paving and paving and paving?
What I think is very interesting from a historical perspective, and I'm putting my maybe planner hat on more than the MDX hat, but what is interesting, if you look at a historical perspective, if you go prior to the 1970s and you looked at the transportation plan for Miami-Dade County, it had a lot of express.
There are just trees that have flower trees that people put out there require a lot of maintenance. Oh.
$8,000 palm trees. There are a lot less expensive palm trees that grow instead of.
Let me tell you. I got to tell you about the $8,000, which are called jewel palms. Let me tell you. We have in some of our projects, in some of our initial projects, such as on the 836 extension, we used all native plant material. What happened was we had to replace it very quickly because the environment of an expressway is very arid, is very strong, it's very hard. And by us selecting those major palms, which by the way are used by the airport, are used by Miami-Dade County, are used by the Department of Transportation, is because that is a very strong plant material that is very resistant to the harsh environment of an expressway. And so it's like buying a good pair of shoes and many pairs of less expensive shoes.
Cheap shoes.
That is the purpose. When you are doing landscaping for an expressway, you really have to take a look at plant material that will be resilient and that can last for a long time. But you guys might. I use my hands a lot, so
No, I was saying they soak up the moisture. It's like sometimes they're sitting in water down there. So I was thinking instead of palms, sometimes maybe in the future we should use like things with canopies or cover some things instead of just sticks.
Oak trees.
All right.
By the way, if anyone would like to be, when we start the study, put on our mailing list, if you go to the website, which is www.mdxway.com, you go to projects, future projects, you look for this one, my name and my email is there. Please send us an email or to the public information email, and we'll make sure that, we can. Thank you, Jess.
Okay, thank you, Terry and Myra from MDX. I'm sure this issue will come back up again regarding the 836. So we'll continue to discuss this. So thank you again. All right, very briefly, since we've been talking about transportation, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, you can't talk about transportation without talking about land use. And as Bill had mentioned, the transportation agencies do not really control land use. However, their facilities have a great impact on land use and how land use changes over time. So I wanted to present a few things, not very specific to Kendall, but something that will that's worthy of discussion and will, I think, give you some ideas as we move into the actual charrette workshop process. On the screen, this is a map of subdivisions. And what makes this interesting is that when land is subdivided, that's really the last step before something actually gets built. And the colors that you see, the greens and the blues, are the earliest subdivisions that occurred in the county. This is, obviously, this is Miami Beach over here. This is downtown Miami, the city of Miami. Homestead down here. And this is the Everglades. So you can see the old subdivisions are in blue and green, mostly in the city of Miami and the beach. And then as you go into the 1940s and 1950s, you see the first wave of suburban development. And that's really the pattern of development that's really the most influential in the county, because that's the time that the most of the stuff got built. The great mass of development really occurred from the 1950s and into the 70s. And of course, development has continued today, and you see the red, which is the most recent subdivisions from the 90s until today. So keep these things in mind as we go along in the presentation, because remember, and think of the character of these areas. You know, I'm sure everybody here has been to downtown Miami, has been to the beach, and been to Coral Gables, and so on. And think of the character of those areas contrasted with the suburban areas from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like East Kendall, the Pinecrest area, the North Central Dade areas, and then, of course, the more recent subdivisions further west. So just keep those things in mind as we go along. This is a map. It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but this is a map of the streetcars that existed in Miami until about the 1930s. And you know, I knew this discussion would come up regarding transit. When we start talking about expressways, because of course you think expressways, you think, well, we can build expressways. Why can't we extend the metro rail system? Well, it's more interesting to actually go back in time and figure out where we were and how we got to where we are now. And this purple line here, there was actually a streetcar rail line that went from downtown all the way to the beach and did a loop along Alton Road and Washington Avenue. There's a streetcar line up in the Edgewater area. There's a streetcar line that ran from downtown all the way to Coral Gables and then on to South Miami. And then there was another streetcar line that ran down Coral Way here and out to about 57th Avenue. And here's a better map of the Miami Beach streetcar that ran along the MacArthur Causeway and onto the beach. And that's what it looked like. This is a view to the north. This is Star Island. You can see the water tower. And this is Belle Isle. This is the old Collins Causeway that was there before the Venetian Islands were built. So you could actually take a train from downtown to the beach back in the old days. And of course, the train is gone, and there's the Baylink project you may have heard of to try and bring that back, to reconnect the beach to the metro rail system by a train. So that's the Miami Beach streetcar system. Then there's the Coral Gables streetcar system that, again, it ran from downtown Miami all the way down Coral Way, as well as Flagler Street into downtown Coral Gables. This is the Colonnade building at the intersection of Miracle Mile and Ponce de Leon. You can see the streetcars used to run down the middle of Miracle Mile. And again, my grandmother actually she used to tell me when she would come down here in the winters that she remembers riding from the beach on the streetcar all the way to the Biltmore Hotel. So this is actually something that, there are people out there who remember using this thing. And so, again, development goes along with transportation. You can't have one with the other, because obviously if you can't get to your land is not very valuable. And Coral Gables actually, the development of Coral Gables, it went along with their transportation system. They couldn't get people to Coral Gables without their streetcar. They had to build a streetcar to get people from downtown Miami when they got off the Flagler train into Coral Gables. So they had to build the streetcar system themselves. And it existed for a number of years. And this is just an interesting example. They were selling these lots as rapid transit lots. You can actually see there was This never got built. Down Segovia Avenue, there was supposed to be a streetcar as well, and they were selling these lots. I guess this was probably prior to the 1926 hurricane, as fronting on this rapid transit street. So, you know, again, as development occurs, development follows the system of transportation that you have. And if you're only going to be building roadways, your land use is going to go along with that. And we'll continue to see examples of this. Unfortunately, in the 1930s and 1940s, the streetcars came to be seen as old-fashioned. Of course, you know, they had been around since the 1880s, 1890s as the country was electrified. And so 1930s, 1940s, the streetcars had been around 50 or 60 years, and they were old-fashioned, they were old, they hadn't been replaced, they were getting run down. And the new thing was buses. So, and this happened throughout the country, the streetcar tracks were pulled up and replaced with buses. And Coral Gables, believe it or not, they replaced their streetcars with buses, and the city continued to run their own transportation system until the Miami-Dade Transit took over in, I believe it was the 1960s and 1970s. Of course, today, they're back in the transit business. They operate the Coral Gables trolley, connecting downtown Coral Gables to the Metro Rail station. So it's just interesting to keep these things in mind as we go along, because remember, Coral Gables, again, it couldn't have existed without the streetcar connecting it to downtown Miami. If anybody's familiar with New York, this is a picture of the Flushing line, which is, if you've been in New York, this is also the number 7 line that goes from Times Square out to Queens. And what's amazing here is that they actually built the subway, the elevated subway, when there was nothing there. There literally was nothing in Queens. There was stuff there, obviously, but compared to what is there now, there was almost nothing. This actually went through farmland at one point.
That's called good planning.
And that is good planning. But believe it or not, remember, at this point in time, this was the teens, 1920s. There was no idea of expressways. Expressways didn't exist. So when the city began to expand, when Queens became part of New York City and the suburbanization of New York City began, the suburbs didn't look like our suburbs. Suburbs look completely different. And the only way you could get to a suburb was via a train. And so that's why they ran the train through farmland, because they knew the farmland would be developed and people would take the train to get to this new development. And this is an aerial photo. This is the number 7 line, the Flushing line here. This area here is called Jackson Heights within Queens. LaGuardia Airport is up here if you've ever flown into New York by LaGuardia. So roughly between LaGuardia and the 7 line, there's this neighborhood called Jackson Heights. And it was developed concurrently with the transportation system. This was farmland prior to the train. When the train
What time frame are you talking about?
This is the teens, 1920s into the 1930s, through the Depression. And you can see the block system, and there were several subway stations. So the idea was you would commute into Manhattan over here. You'd be able to walk to the train and go into the city very easily. But you would have a relatively low density type of development with lots of open space, courtyards, and things like that. And again, you can see those long blocks that would lead you onto the train station down here. And these were mid-rise type apartment buildings. And this was the type of development. And so this is, remember, when you have a train system, you have to have a certain level of density to adequately support the transit service. But since this was developed concurrently with the transportation system, the land values were sufficiently high that you couldn't build at a density any less than this. So it's amazing how things seem to coincide, and things just happen to make sense when things happen at a point in time where there weren't any other alternatives. So again, people didn't have cars at this point. Their cars were very rare. You had the streetcars and you had the new subway system. And what's amazing about Jackson Heights is that it was so well designed and so convenient that, unlike many neighborhoods in New York, this area never declined and it never gentrified. It was always nice. It's always been nice ever since it's built. And so you can see when you have a high quality of design in a desirable location, you get a place that has lasting value. So anyway, going back to Miami, this is, I found this photo from our zoning files. This is from about 1965 or so. And I think at that point in time, Kendall had just been widened to 4 lanes. And believe it or not, they had a parking lane. There was a continuous parking lane all along Kendall Drive. It was 4 lanes plus a parking lane on either side.
You have to say it's called the road to nowhere.
Okay, well, it was the road to Krome Avenue because they 4-laned it all the way out to Krome Avenue.
That's called good planning too.
Well, but imagine if a streetcar line, not even a subway line like in New York, if a streetcar line had been put down the middle of this at the same time that Kendall was built, and you would have a slightly higher density type development had developed, beginning in the 1960s, 1970s along Kendall, where people could have actually walked to a transportation system that would take you into the city. Imagine how different Kendall could have turned out. But of course, at that point in time, in the 1960s, 1970s, that was not even an idea. The future was cars. Everybody had their cars. Everybody has a 3-car garage and so on. And that just wasn't even a concept at that point in time.
I was wondering, Jess,
yes.
why wasn't relocated to kind of a transit facility on Kendall? Why the reason not having transit?
Who knows? That's before my time,
Actually, that's about planning provisions or
actually, it's a political issue. The reason that the streetcars were decommissioned in most cities in the United States had to do with political lobbyists, particularly representing the tire and the auto industry. So Goodyear was one of the significant companies that lobbied for the removal of the streetcars in cities in the United States. So it's actually a political will here, and the will particularly of the companies that would have benefited from the sale of more vehicles.
Yes, I didn't mention that, but that's absolutely correct. I think at some point in time, I think General Motors and Goodyear and the other tire and the oil companies, they got sued and they had to go to antitrust. It was an antitrust violation, and they had to pay like $1. That was the ultimate fine for them colluding to buy up all the streetcar companies, because most of them were actually privately owned, and they would buy them up and then replace them with buses. And if riding a streetcar and riding a bus is a very different experience. A bus is the ride is unpleasant. You're always stopping and starting. A streetcar is on rails. It's much smoother. It's a much more pleasant experience. And there's no when the streetcars were replaced with buses, the ridership went way down, because people said, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to buy this new car, because cars now are cheap. I moved to the suburbs. I have a garage. I have a place to park my car now. So forget it. And that's really the decline of transit service in this country.
What goes around comes around.
Yes. Can I finish it? Just a couple more slides, and then we can discuss this until we get kicked out. But anyway, so Kendall, 1960, 1965, Kendall and 107th Avenue today. Of course, we're stuck with what we've got until we figure out some other way to do something different. Now, this is 167th Avenue. This is where the UDB is now. There's Krome Avenue out there somewhere. And we might, in the future, have an expressway. Maybe it'll be here, maybe it'll be out along Krome. And so the question is, and one of the goals of this planning project is to see if this line is going to move, because remember, this is in the expansion area. This is already slated as if the land moves, it's supposed to move in this area.
It's not an if, it's a when.
So, well, again, that's why we're here. The line may never move. That may be the decision of the board. That's up to the board. But if we don't look at the future and we don't try and plan, even if the line never moves, we're doing a disservice to the whole county. Because you can't just pretend nothing's going to change, because change is always going to happen. So the reason I'm bringing these looking at the past and seeing where we came from is to see, we need to understand how we can go forward in the future. Now, we can continue to do this, and we know what we're going to get if we continue to do this. We're just going to get more traffic, We're going to get more people who are not going to take transit because it's too difficult to take transit when you live in this type of built environment. It just doesn't, it's not conducive to it. Not that there's anything wrong with this. This is wonderful. You have a nice house, you have a nice yard, you might live on a lake, you got a nice sidewalk in front of your house. But again, there's all kinds of other things that are negative about it. So we have to keep that in mind. So we can continue to do this out to Krome Avenue, or we can think about doing something different. And that's the purpose of this planning project. Anyway, this is the website. You're all familiar with it. We're going to have this presentation on the website so you can download it and think about it over the new year. I'm sure you're going to be doing that. But anyway, okay, questions if you have any. If not,
Very nice presentation.
thanks for attending. Yes, Terry.
In the 70s, there was a conscious, and you probably were not even thought of. Yes. There was a conscious decision from planning not to allow any infrastructure, expressways. You know, obviously, transit was always an issue of money, but to the west side, because at that time there was a thought that if you did not have the roads, you would not have the development. And as you said, well, development always follows roads. But what happened in Kendall, in West Kendall, was the growth happened with no infrastructure.
Well, we had the turnpike. The turnpike was built in the 70s. That was an incredible spur for development. I mean, you had the Palmetto in the late 50s and 60s, and then how many miles west? 3 miles west, you had the turnpike in the mid 1970s. So those two things, they continued to spur development as far as it could go.
But if you look at the aerial map, the development then continued 10 miles west with absolutely no infrastructure.
Well, that's not.
But anyway, I was just wondering what,
No. I don't know.
Instead of, like, it would be interesting to see how, in fact, like what you did with New York, how it happened, so that obviously we can avoid things like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you had a... You sure?
No, I was going to say that trolleys, I would not work in Miami. I know they've tried to bring them back again. They think about taking trolleys to Miami Beach. We wanted Metro Rail to go to Miami Beach, and they said, no, don't mess with us. It was okay for them to put bulldozers in the ocean to artificially create a high tide line and build their hotels in the water, but no, we can't mess with them. It's so nice to go on Kendall on some transportation, wind up on South Beach, have a few drinks, not have to worry about driving.
Absolutely.
The trolleys usually are in the middle of the street, and you've got to cross lanes of traffic. You think there's one driver in Miami-Dade intelligent enough to know not to kill the pedestrian trying to get into the trolley? And then with all of our rain, the trolley tracks are slicker. It's like ice. You can't really drive on them, and people would be driving on them, skidding all over the place. So trolleys, I think, are a dead issue, or at least I hope they will be. But what we need are, how many buses do we have in Miami-Dade now?
We would have to check with transit. I have no idea.
Because for years we had 500. And then big splash of money, we bought 500 more throughout the original 500. We were spinning wheels. I heard last, maybe 5 years ago, we might have been up to 1,000. But a bus system that has a bus running every hour, 1 an hour, is not a mass transit.
No, that's correct. And people who have a car in the garage, they're not going to use that. Only the people who don't have any car available to them at all is going to use that type of system. So you're absolutely correct. Yes, sir.
The sad reality of Kendall Drive as a corridor for transit has been shot down because of the residents of East Kendall who don't want an elevated rail system driving by their houses. The East Kendall community is at odds with the West Kendall community. Those of us who've chosen to live out here are being held hostage by the people in East Kendall who feel that we're intruding on their lifestyle because we have to cut through their neighborhoods to get where we want to go.
You're absolutely
And it's caused
correct.
everything to come to a gridlock.
When we were working on the East Kendall project, which was from US 1 to, or from the Palmetto to 97th Avenue, the Kendall Link project was going on at the same time, and one of the alternatives for the transportation, one of the things that they analyzed was an elevated metro rail system. And so we actually included in the charrette report a rendering of what the metro rail could look like if it ran elevated along Kendall Drive. And the charrette steering committee, they asked us to take that out. They didn't want to see it in there. They didn't want any discussion about the metro rail at all. And so exactly that goes back to your comment.
The interesting thing was I was at all those meetings, and I sat at a table with people who lived on Kendall Drive. Oh no, we can't have an elevated thing. I said, no problem. Well, 10-lane Kendall Drive, will you like that? They all changed their minds. There needed to have been a better push, because that threat alone, either take their houses or run Kendall up to their front door.
I mean, you know, there's a trade-off for everything. So.
That's why we're having this extension of the 12 widening Kendall.
So the answer is Martha Backer's extension.
Okay. Well, anyway, I think this was an excellent meeting. It was very informative. Thank you again to Phil Stein.